What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. My name is Lucas Wencl, and today we are talking about 10 players that you can look to drop after week 5 of fantasy football to make those waiver wire adds ahead of week 6. Now, admittedly, the waiver wire is looking kind of thin this week, but if you are in dire need, you can safely drop one of these 10 players. As always, we'll cover guys in deep leagues, shallow leagues as well. But before we dive on into our list, if you want a chance at winning a signed Justin Jefferson Vikings helmet for free, courtesy of our friends at pristineauction.com, all you need to do is head to fantasypros.com/contest, complete the form, and either download the Fantasy Pros Draft Wizard app, leave a review for the podcast, or follow us on X, Instagram, or TikTok at Fantasy Pros. The more actions you complete, the more entries you receive. We'll be announcing a winner right here on the podcast, so if you're watching over on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to come claim your prize when we announce it. Our first cut candidate this week is Dallas Cowboys wide receiver Brandin Cooks. Cooks was on our list last week after finishing as the wide receiver 70, wide receiver 80, and wide receiver 90 in weeks 2 through 4. Now Cooks finds himself on the IR dealing with an infection in his knee, and to rub salt in the wound, Jalen Tolbert had a career game on Sunday Night Football. He drew a team-high 10 targets, catching 7 of them for 87 yards, including the game-winning touchdown. When Brandin Cooks is eligible to come back, there may not be a wide receiver 2 role for him to come back to if Jalen Tolbert continues to flash this kind of upside. Even if you have an IR spot to stash Cooks, I honestly wouldn't waste it because his production and situation have given you zero reason to hold out any kind of hope. The second player on our list is Mike Williams, wide receiver for the New York Jets. Originally, we were anticipating Big Mike would have a slow start to his 2024 campaign since he's coming off of an ACL tear sustained early in the 2023 season. However, we're nearly 1/3 of the way through the regular season, and I'm not sure how much better his situation gets. He's clearly third in the pecking order behind Garrett Wilson and Allen Lazard. He played 18 less snaps than both in week 5 and drew less than 5 targets for the 4th time this year, even with Garrett Wilson seeing 22 targets on Sunday. Mike hasn't finished higher than the wide receiver 41 in any week this year, including 3 games outside of the top 60 wide receivers and a goose egg in week 1. You can keep him as a stash if you really want, but none of these Jets wide receivers are in sync with Aaron Rodgers right now, making it tough to keep Big Mike on your fantasy team. Returning to our list again this week is Jacksonville Jaguars wide receiver Gabe Davis. Despite the Jaguars putting up 37 points on Sunday, Gabe Davis once again was third in production in this wide receiver room. Per usual, Davis played the most snaps and ran the most routes against the Colts, but only turned it into 38 yards on 3 receptions and lost a fumble on top of it. It was reported that Gabe Davis got into it with Trevor Lawrence on the sideline after being open in the middle of the field on a dig route, but not getting thrown the ball. Clearly, these two aren't on the same page, and I don't think we need to make excuses or come up with a dream scenario to roster a guy who's finished as the wide receiver 70 or worse over the last 3 weeks. The next player you can look to drop this week is Trey Benson, running back for the Arizona Cardinals. In a scrappy win over the 49ers on Sunday, Benson played a big fat 0% of offensive snaps. 0 times he was utilized in an offensive formation. That's not great, especially when Amari DeMercado was the primary relief for James Conner. Benson's primary usage this year has been in garbage time, where in week 2 they blew the doors off the Rams, and in week 4 they got walloped by the Commanders. I know if anything happens to James Conner, we're going to see Trey Benson, but I've said this before, I don't believe it just becomes Trey Benson's backfield. You're going to see Amari DeMercado play a healthy role, especially in the passing game, and they'll hinder each other from having a ton of fantasy value. If you want to keep Benson stashed in a deep league, that's fine, but if you're in a shallower league and holding out hope, there's likely better options on the waiver wire this week. Coming in next on our drop list is Mike Gesicki, tight end for the Cincinnati Bengals. There was optimism for Gesicki after his back-to-back top 12 finishes at the position in weeks 2 and 3, but ever since T. Higgins has come back, the tables have definitely turned. In the last 2 games, Gesicki has only caught 3 passes on 3 targets and continues to cede opportunity to rookie tight end Eric All out of Iowa. For the 3rd time this year, All played more snaps than Gesicki and continues to see his snaps increase week over week in both 11 and 12 personnel. I mentioned this with Andre Yoshivas last week as well. Why throw to Mike Gesicki when you can throw to either Jamar Chase or T. Higgins? That's what we saw on Sunday with Chase and Higgins both scoring 29 plus fantasy points. You can definitely do better than Mike Gesicki at tight end, and since he's likely your backup, you can drop him for another positional player with higher upside. Unless you're in a 2-quarterback or super flex league, it is 100% time to move on from Deshaun Watson. It was a rather pitiful effort for Watson on Sunday, who still had glaring accuracy issues and has yet to throw for more than 200 yards on the year. His weekly fantasy performances haven't felt as off-putting as his on-field performances because he's still giving you 25 to 40 rushing yards each week. I just don't see how this gets any better for Deshaun Watson after botching a perfect bounce-back opportunity against the Commanders on Sunday. The Browns are now 1-4, the entire NFL fan base is calling for Jameis Winston to take over, and 5 weeks of evidence is more than enough to make a change sooner rather than later. Obviously, it's much more complex than that when the franchise has $230 million tied up in Deshaun Watson, and Kevin Stefanski may have little to no say whatsoever. For fantasy football, though, Watson has absolutely zero reason to be on your single quarterback fantasy football teams and can be dropped to the waiver wire ASAP. Another tight end you can look to drop this week is Hunter Henry of the New England Patriots. It continues to be a revolving door of who's going to be the Patriots' primary pass catcher each week, and while Hunter Henry played a season-high 93% of the snaps against the Dolphins, it just wasn't his turn. Demario Douglas led the way with 9 targets, and despite only catching one of his targets, Jalen Polk drew 6. Polk almost added a touchdown as well, but only came down with 1 foot in bounds. Despite all of that, Jacoby Brissett also has yet to throw for 200 yards this year, and this passing game has zero explosiveness to it. We can come up with all the alternate universes where Hunter Henry has another 12-target game in the foreseeable future, but the reality is that he's seen more than 3 targets in only 2 games this year, and one of them was this past week where he drew 4 targets, so not much better. Hunter Henry doesn't need to be a backup tight end on your team. You can stream better options off the waiver wire each week instead of clogging up a roster spot on your team. Another running back making his return to this list is Ezekiel Elliott of the Dallas Cowboys. If it wasn't over last week for Zeke, it absolutely is now. Rico Dowdle paved the way for the Cowboys' backfield, getting 20 totes and scoring a touchdown off a 22-yard reception. At this point, it's not a conversation of how the backfield splits between Dowdle and Zeke. It's a conversation of how the backfield splits between Zeke and Hunter Luepke. They each played 23 snaps, they each ran 14 routes, and they each got 1 target. That's where we're at with the Dallas Cowboys backfield. Rico Dowdle is the clear 1A with Zeke and Hunter Luepke as the tandem 1B. I would be shocked to see Zeke rostered in more than 20 to 25% of Yahoo leagues after this week and see zero reason in keeping him beyond week 5. Up next on our drop list is Pittsburgh Steelers running back Jaylen Warren. Warren has now missed 2 consecutive weeks with a knee injury after he dealt with a hamstring injury during preseason. There's a chance he returns in week 6, but the Pittsburgh Steelers cannot run the football right now. Despite playing the Cowboys' hampered defense on Sunday Night Football, the Steelers running backs could only muster up 65 yards, and Najee Harris averaged only 3 yards per carry. Warren could be a necessary spark plug to ignite some efficiency into this running back room, but even in his 3 games played this year, he's averaged only 3.6 yards per carry and has finished as the running back 48, running back 34, and running back 65. I wanted the Jaylen Warren breakout this year just as much as anybody else, but it's officially time to send him to the waiver wire in shallow leagues. Our last cut candidate of the week remains Las Vegas Raiders running back Zamir White. Zamir didn't play in week 5 due to a groin injury, but that honestly gives you all the more permission to drop him. The Raiders wanted to pivot straight to Alexander Mattison on Sunday and give him the lion's share of touches, and per Nathan Yonke of PFF, Mattison played 39 of 48 snaps through the first 3 quarters. But the Raiders, well, they ran into the same issue they have all year. They can't run the football. Mattison averaged only 2.5 yards per carry despite getting 15 totes. Amir Abdullah was the running back to find the end zone on Sunday and caught all 3 of his targets. This Raiders running back room is not worth the headache, and when Zamir White comes back, we'll likely get more of the same from the first 4 weeks. Alrighty, y'all, that is it. That's all I've got for you today, but before we sign off, remember, if you want a chance at winning a signed Justin Jefferson Vikings helmet for free, courtesy of our friends at pristineauction.com, all you need to do is head to fantasypros.com/contest, complete the form, and either download the Fantasy Pros Draft Wizard app, leave a review for the podcast, or follow us on X, Instagram, or TikTok at FantasyPros. The more actions you complete, the more entries you'll receive. We'll be announcing a winner right here on the podcast, so if you're watching over on YouTube, Be sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to come claim your prize when we announce it.